The sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow on the cheerful yellow walls. I stood at the stove, the smell of sizzling bacon filling the air. "Ethan, breakfast is almost ready," I called out, my heart swelling with a familiar warmth. I stirred the eggs, thinking about how lucky I was. Ethan was a good man, always kind and supportive. Yet, something felt off. A nagging emptiness lingered in the corners of my mind, whispering that something was missing. As I plated the food, I couldn't shake the feeling of dissatisfaction. How could I feel this way in a home filled with love? I glanced at the framed photos on the wall, memories of our laughter and joy. But those moments felt distant now, overshadowed by an unnameable longing. What's wrong with me? I wondered, a question I couldn't quite answer. The sound of Ethan's footsteps brought me back to the present. He walked into the kitchen, his smile brightening the room. "Everything smells amazing," he said, leaning over to kiss my cheek. I felt a rush of affection, but the emptiness returned, more pronounced now. I forced a smile, trying to ignore the internal struggle. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, sitting down at the table. "Yeah, just had a restless night," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I picked at my food, my mind drifting to a memory that had stirred something inside me. It was the first time I saw Father Gabriel at church, standing at the altar with a presence that pulled me in. His voice, deep and soothing, resonated through the space, and I found myself captivated. I remembered how he spoke about hope and love, and how he seemed to understand the silent battles I faced. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, concern etching his features. "Of course," I said too quickly. But my mind was elsewhere, replaying the moment I first locked eyes with Gabriel. The way he spoke to the congregation, how his gaze swept through the crowd, and how, for a fleeting second, it felt like he saw straight into my soul. "Just lost in thought, I guess," I added, forcing a smile that felt more like a mask. As we finished breakfast, the unease inside me grew. I knew I should focus on Ethan, on the life we built together. Yet, the deeper I sank into my thoughts, the clearer it became that I was at a crossroads. A sudden chill ran through me. What was this connection I felt towards Gabriel? I couldn't deny the spark that ignited during our brief conversations after church, the way he listened intently to my struggles, his eyes searching mine for understanding. It was dangerous, thrilling even, and I found myself questioning everything. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan's voice interrupted my reverie, pulling me back. "Just life," I said, trying to keep my tone light. But inside, I felt the weight of my secret growing heavier. "Life can be complicated," he replied, his eyes searching mine. "If something is bothering you, you know you can always talk to me, right?" I nodded, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain this gnawing emptiness? How could I tell him about the man who stirred feelings I thought I had buried? After clearing the table, I returned to the kitchen, the warmth of the morning sun contrasting sharply with the chill of my thoughts. The connection with Gabriel was blossoming, and I didn't know how to stop it. Each moment spent in his presence felt like a sweet temptation, and I was afraid of what it might lead to. The day stretched ahead of me, filled with mundane tasks. Yet, I felt a shadow looming, a sense of foreboding creeping into my heart. I looked out the window, watching as the world continued to move, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within me. How could I reconcile this growing connection with Gabriel and the life I shared with Ethan? I didn't have answers, only an unsettling feeling that change was on the horizon. The question lingered. Could I let go of everything I had known? Or would I cling to the familiar, even if it no longer felt like home? The church was filled with a familiar warmth as I walked in for our weekly gathering. The tall windows let in golden rays of sunlight, illuminating the faces of those I had come to know. Yet, As I took my seat, my mind wandered to a different warmth, one that felt both comforting and dangerous. Father Gabriel stood at the front, his presence commanding yet soothing, and I felt my heart flutter. As the service went on, I found myself stealing glances at him. His deep voice resonated with the congregation, but my thoughts drifted away from his words. I remembered our last encounter, how he had listened to me during confession. His eyes filled with understanding. "You are not alone in your struggles," he had said, and I had felt as if he was speaking directly to me. After the service ended, I lingered near the door, hoping for a moment to speak with him. The other parishioners chatted and laughed, but I felt a pull toward the catechism room, our secret haven. As I entered, I found him organizing some papers, a gentle smile breaking across his face when he saw me. "Hello?" he said warmly. "How are you today?" "I'm okay," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just trying to find some peace." He nodded, his expression shifting to one of concern. "It's important to talk about our burdens. What weighs on your heart?" I hesitated, unsure if I should share my feelings. The emptiness I felt at home, the tension between my duty to Ethan and the growing connection to Gabriel, it all twisted inside me like a storm. "Sometimes I feel lost," I admitted, looking down at my hands, like I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Gabriel took a step closer, his eyes searching mine. "You deserve to feel whole," he said softly. "Sometimes, the path to that wholeness is not clear, but talking helps." Our eyes locked, and I felt a thrill run through me. The air between us shifted, charged with something unspoken. I could see the compassion in his gaze, but there was also something else, something that made my heart race. "Father, I started, my voice trailing off as I felt vulnerable and exposed. "Call me Gabriel," he interrupted gently. "When we share our truths, we are equals in that moment." "Gabriel," I repeated, testing the name on my tongue. It felt forbidden, yet liberating. I've been struggling with my feelings. I love my husband, Ethan, but there's an emptiness I can't shake. "Love can be complicated," he said, his voice low and reassuring. He reached out, brushing his fingers lightly against my arm. "You are not alone in feeling this way." The touch sent a shiver down my spine, igniting a spark of longing within me. I knew I should pull away, but instead, I found myself leaning closer. "But it's wrong to feel this way about you," I whispered, almost pleading for him to understand. "Is it wrong to seek comfort?" he asked, his brow furrowing slightly. "We are human, and we crave connection. That is not a sin." His words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, but they also filled me with fear. "I shouldn't be feeling this," I insisted, pulling away slightly. "I'm married." "Your heart is your own," Gabriel replied, his voice steady. "You have to follow what feels right for you." I felt torn. On one hand, there was Ethan, who had always been my anchor. But on the other hand, there was this undeniable chemistry with Gabriel that pulled me in. "What if I hurt him?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What if I make the wrong choice?" "Every choice carries a risk," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "But living in fear is not truly living. You must explore your heart, even if it frightens you." Our eyes met again, and I felt a rush of emotions. There was a thrill in his words, an invitation to step into a world that was both exhilarating and terrifying. As I left the catechism room, I felt a weight on my shoulders. I was caught between two worlds, two desires. The connection with Gabriel was intoxicating, yet the thought of betraying Ethan filled me with dread. I walked home, my heart racing, knowing that I was on a path that could change everything. The air in the catechism room felt charged with a tension I could no longer ignore. Each time I met Gabriel's gaze, a spark ignited within me, pulling me closer to the edge of a decision I feared to make. My heart raced as I replayed our conversations in my mind, the way he seemed to see right through me, understanding my struggles without me having to say a word. As the weeks passed, our encounters became more frequent. I felt as if we were dancing on a tightrope, one misstep away from falling into a chasm of desire. I would steal glances at him during church services. He would catch my eye and give me a small smile, one that made my stomach flutter. The church, once a place of solace, now felt like a battleground between my heart and my mind. One afternoon, as we sat in the dimly lit catechism room, I could feel the gravity of the moment pulling us together. The door was slightly ajar, and the light from the hallway cast long shadows across the room. Gabriel leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You seem distant lately," he said, concern etched on his face. "Is everything all right?" I hesitated, my heart pounding. "I'm just trying to figure things out," I finally replied, my voice shaky. The truth was, I was drowning in a sea of confusion. I wanted to confide in him, to tell him about the emptiness I felt in my life, but the words got stuck in my throat. He reached out, placing a hand on my arm. The warmth of his touch sent shivers down my spine. "You don't have to hide from me," he encouraged gently. "You can talk to me about anything." In that moment, I felt an overwhelming urge to lean into him, to bridge the space between us. But I hesitated, knowing the consequences of such an action. Yet the magnetic pull was stronger than my fear. I took a deep breath, my pulse racing, and in that breath, I made my choice. I leaned in, our lips meeting in a soft, tentative kiss. Time seemed to freeze as the world around us faded away. It felt right and wrong all at once, a beautiful contradiction. My mind screamed that I was betraying Ethan, but my heart sang a melody of passion I had long forgotten. Gabriel responded to my kiss with a gentle urgency, deepening it as if he had been waiting for this moment as long as I had. My thoughts tangled in a whirlwind of exhilaration and guilt, and as we pulled away, reality crashed back into me like a wave. "What have we done?" I gasped, my breath heavy in the silence between us. I felt both alive and tormented, a mix of emotions swirling within me. Gabriel looked at me, his eyes filled with an intensity that made my heart race. "We've opened a door," he said softly, "one that leads to something we can't ignore." I shook my head, my mind racing. "But what about Ethan? He doesn't deserve this." My voice trembled as the weight of my actions settled over me like a heavy cloak. "Your feelings matter too," he replied, his expression earnest. "You can't pretend they don't exist. We can't go back to how things were before." I stared at him, a storm of emotions raging inside me. Memories of Ethan flooded my mind. The warmth of his smile, the way he held me at night, the countless little things that made up our life together. Yet, those moments felt distant now, overshadowed by the thrill of my connection with Gabriel. "I feel alive with you," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But this is wrong. I love Ethan." Gabriel's eyes softened, but they held a spark of determination. "I know this is complicated, but we can't deny what's between us. We have to face it." As I sat there, grappling with the consequences of my actions, I realized I was at a crossroads. Each path held a different future, one filled with the comfort of Ethan's love, and the other steeped in the intoxicating passion I felt with Gabriel. The weight of my choices settled heavily on my shoulders. I felt exhilarated, yet terrified. I had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. As I left the catechism room that day, I knew my life would never be the same. As I lay in bed, the sheets tangled around me like the thoughts in my mind, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. The affair with Gabriel had become a secret I could no longer ignore. Every moment I spent with him filled me with excitement, yet my heart ached for Ethan. It was a constant battle between desire and loyalty, and I was losing. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the soft sounds of the morning. I could hear Ethan in the kitchen, humming a tune as he prepared breakfast. His voice carried through the hallway, warm and inviting. I wanted to join him, to share in the normalcy of our life together, but I felt heavy with the weight of my choices. "Good morning, love," Ethan called out, his voice bright and cheerful. "Morning," I replied, forcing a smile as I stepped into the kitchen. He turned to me, his eyes sparkling, and my heart twisted. How could I betray this man who loved me so deeply? Ethan placed a plate of pancakes in front of me. "I made your favorite." He beamed, and I could see how much he cared. I picked up my fork, but the food tasted bland against the turmoil inside me. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern creeping into his voice. "You seem a little distant lately." "I'm fine," I said quickly, not wanting to delve into the truth. I brushed aside his worry, but it gnawed at me. I knew I was pulling away, and it hurt both of us. As I ate, my mind drifted to Gabriel. Our stolen moments together were intoxicating, but they left me feeling hollow. I remembered our last encounter, the way his eyes ignited when he looked at me, how his laughter seemed to erase all my worries. But with each memory came a rush of guilt. That evening, I found myself in the parish hall for a church meeting. Gabriel stood at the front, speaking passionately about community service. I watched him, captivated by his presence. He caught my gaze and smiled, a knowing smile that made my heart race. After the meeting, I lingered behind, hoping for a moment alone with him. As the others filed out, I took a deep breath and approached him. "Father Gabriel," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" "Of course," he replied, his tone warm and inviting. We stepped into the quiet of the catechism room, the air thick with unspoken tension. "I've been feeling so lost," I admitted, my heart pounding. "I don't know what to do." He stepped closer, his presence both comforting and electrifying. It's only natural to feel conflicted. Love can be complicated. "I love Ethan," I said, my voice trembling, "but I can't help the way I feel about you." Gabriel looked at me, his eyes searching. "You deserve to be happy. But what does that happiness look like for you?" "I don't know," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "I feel like I'm living a lie. Every time I'm with you, I feel alive, but then I think of Ethan, and I feel like a monster." "Guilt can be a heavy burden," he said gently. "But you must decide what you truly want." I took a shaky breath, grappling with my emotions. "I want to be faithful, but it's so hard. I don't want to hurt either of you." Gabriel reached out, brushing his fingers against mine. "You have to be honest with yourself. Avoiding the truth will only lead to more pain." I pulled my hand away, panic rising. "What if I can't choose? What if I lose everything?" "You won't lose everything," he assured me. "But you must confront your feelings. Ignoring them won't make them go away." As I left the catechism room, the weight of his words lingered. I felt torn, standing at a crossroads between two paths. One led to the safety of my life with Ethan, the other to the wild, uncharted territory of my desires with Gabriel. That night, as I lay in bed beside Ethan, I stared at the ceiling again. The guilt wrapped around me tighter than ever, and I realized this was not just about love. It was about honesty, about facing the truth of who I was and what I wanted. How could I carry on with this burden? I closed my eyes, wishing for clarity, but all I found was a darkness that threatened to swallow me whole. That night felt like any other, but I had no idea that it would change everything. Ethan had gone out to run some errands, leaving me alone with my thoughts. My heart raced as I remembered the last time I was with Gabriel. The thrill of our secret still lingered in my chest, but so did the weight of my guilt. I stood in the kitchen, trying to focus on dinner, but my mind kept drifting back to him. I heard the sound of the front door opening, and my stomach twisted. "I'm home," Ethan called out, his voice warm and comforting. I tried to push away the knot of anxiety building inside me. "Hey, honey, how was your trip?" I asked, forcing a smile as I turned to greet him. "It was good. Just picked up a few things for the week," he replied, walking into the kitchen. He stopped short, his eyes narrowing as he looked at me. "You okay? You seem a little distracted." "I'm fine, just tired from cooking," I said, avoiding his gaze. I could feel the tension in the air, a silent storm brewing between us. Ethan stepped closer, concern etched on his face. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" "Of course," I said, but my heart raced at the thought of confessing my secret. I turned back to the stove, hoping to hide the turmoil inside me. As I stirred the pot, my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at it, and my pulse quickened when I saw Gabriel's name. I felt drawn to him, even as I knew I shouldn't. I wanted to respond, but a wave of guilt washed over me. "Who's that?" Ethan asked, his voice suddenly sharper. "Just a friend," I replied quickly, trying to sound nonchalant. But Ethan's eyes narrowed further, suspicion creeping into his expression. "Are you sure that's all it is?" he pressed, crossing his arms. I felt trapped. "Yes, Ethan, it's nothing," I snapped, immediately regretting my tone. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the rising tension between us. For a moment, we stood in silence, the only sound the bubbling pot on the stove. Then, without warning, the doorbell rang. My heart dropped. I knew who it was before I even opened the door. As I reached for the doorknob, Ethan's voice stopped me. "You're not going to answer that, are you? But before I could finish, I opened the door to find Gabriel standing there, his face lighting up when he saw me. But then I noticed the sudden chill in the air as Ethan appeared behind me. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, panic flooding through me. Gabriel's smile faded as he looked at Ethan, and I could feel the tension crackling like electricity. "I came to see you," Gabriel said slowly, his eyes flicking between us. Ethan stepped forward, his expression darkening. "Is that right? You think it's okay to just show up like this?" I felt my heart race at the accusation in Ethan's voice. "Ethan, wait." "Stay out of this," he snapped, his eyes fixed on Gabriel. "I want to know what you've been doing with my wife." In that moment, I felt paralyzed. The shame washed over me like a tidal wave. I wanted to scream, to run away, but I stood frozen in place. Gabriel took a step back, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. "Ethan, I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to check on her." "Check on her?" Ethan echoed, disbelief etched on his face. "You think I'm going to believe that?" The air was thick with unspoken words, and I felt the weight of my betrayal pressing down on me. "Ethan, please." "No, I deserve to know the truth," he shouted, his voice echoing in the hallway. I felt tears welling up as the reality of my actions sank in. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, my voice trembling. Ethan looked at me, hurt and betrayal flashing across his face. "So it's true then?" The silence that followed was deafening. In that moment, I felt utterly lost, torn between the love I had for Ethan and the thrill that Gabriel brought into my life. "Yes," I finally admitted, my voice breaking. "It's true." Ethan turned away, his hands clenched into fists. "I can't believe this. I thought we had something real." As he walked away, I felt the ground beneath me crumble. I was left standing there, paralyzed by guilt and regret, knowing that I had shattered the trust of the one person who had loved me unconditionally. The weight of my betrayal pressed down on my chest, and I realized that everything I had built was now hanging by a thread. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I could still feel the weight of Ethan's hurt in my chest. The room was dim, shadows pooling in the corners as the evening light faded. I stared at the wall, the same wall that had witnessed our laughter, our quiet moments, and now, our heartbreak. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, and I felt lost in a sea of confusion. I thought about the life I had with Ethan, the stability, the warmth, the love that wrapped around me like a soft blanket. He deserved so much more than a wife torn between her heart and her desires. But then there was Gabriel. My heart raced at the thought of him, the way his eyes sparkled when he spoke to me, the way he seemed to see right through my soul. But was that enough? Was it worth the pain I had caused? The phone buzzed on the bedside table, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from Gabriel. "I miss you." My heart fluttered, but guilt washed over me like a cold wave. I replied with a simple, "I miss you too." But I knew it was a lie. I was torn, and every moment spent thinking of Gabriel made me feel like I was betraying Ethan all over again. I could hear Ethan moving around in the kitchen. The sound of pots clanging together made my stomach twist. I wanted to go to him, to hold him, and tell him how sorry I was. But the truth hung like a thick fog between us. Our connection felt fragile, and I feared even the slightest touch would shatter it completely. "Are you okay?" Ethan called from the kitchen, his voice laced with concern. I took a deep breath, knowing I couldn't hide my turmoil any longer. "I'm just thinking," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Thinking about what?" He appeared in the doorway, his brow furrowed, concern etched on his face. "Just everything," I said, avoiding his gaze. "I love you, you know that, right?" He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine for the truth. "I know you say that, but it hasn't felt that way lately. You've been so distant." I felt the tears prick my eyes. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm just lost." "Lost?" he echoed, his voice thick with emotion. "What does that even mean? You can talk to me. I want to help you." I opened my mouth, ready to spill my heart, but the words caught in my throat. How could I tell him the truth? How could I explain the way Gabriel made me feel alive, yet so deeply wrong? "I just don't want to hurt you," I finally whispered. "Then don't," he said softly, stepping back as if my admission had pushed him away. "Don't hurt me anymore. Please." His words cut deep, and I felt the weight of my choices crashing down on me. I had to make a decision. Could I let go of the thrill with Gabriel and embrace the comfort of Ethan's love? Or would I chase the fire that sparked between me and Gabriel, risking everything I had built with Ethan? I closed my eyes, the memories flooding back. Ethan's laughter, the way he held me close during stormy nights, the promises we made to each other. "What do I do?" I whispered into the silence. "Choose," Ethan replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Choose what you want." I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze. It was a moment of vulnerability, of truth. "I need time to think," I said, my heart racing. "Take all the time you need," he said, stepping back into the shadows of the kitchen. "But just remember, I won't wait forever." As he left, I felt the walls of our home closing in around me. I was at a crossroads, and every path felt like it would lead to heartbreak. I knew I had to confront my own heart, to decide what love truly meant to me. Would I choose the safety of Ethan's unwavering love, or the intoxicating pull of Gabriel's passion? With each passing moment, the choice loomed larger. I had to find the courage to embrace the consequences of my desires, whatever they may be. Share this story if you believe that love can conquer even the toughest challenges. Leave a comment about a time when you faced a difficult choice in your own love life, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales like this one.